Meeting to order. It is 5:30 on April 20th. Welcome to the New Hanover County Board of Education interim meeting. We will start with our invocation, and I would like to welcome Pastor Ethan Welch from the Bridge Church to the microphone to provide our invocation. The Bridge Church is located at 2101 Market Street, Wilmington, North Carolina. Pastor Welch, thank you so much for being here. If I could have everyone please stand.
It's a great privilege to be with you this evening in person, and I just want to say that each of you are loved tonight, valued, and we're so grateful for you and for the work that you do for thousands of students and families in our county. And so we're grateful for you. As I tell our church, people are the mission, so students are the mission. As we pray, let's take a moment of reflection for the loss of one of our educators in these past few days. As we remember Jessica, let's take a moment and just reflect. Father, it's in moments like these where we recognize the brevity of life and our existence. And we're grateful for this opportunity to live and to be here in what I believe is a great county and a great place. And Father, tonight, in Jesus' name, I just ask that you would grant these leaders, those who govern this great county and that play a tremendous role in seeing that our students are valued and cherished and equipped and educated. Father, I ask in Jesus' name for great wisdom and discernment for each of them. Father, people are the mission, students are the mission, so let us do as best we can to make sure that children are safe, that children are valued, that there is equity, that there's great opportunity as best we can for every student in this great county. Father, we ask that you would comfort this county as well in the loss of our dear friend and servant. I pray that you would comfort those who are closest to her, family and friends, and school, students, administration, all those who interacted with her on such a daily basis. Thank you for her great service and the way that she gave of her energy, her life, her vocation, her career for the sake of others. And so, Father, we thank you. Thank you for this moment. We ask for your blessing, your direction, for your help tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor Welch, for those comments. I would too also like to make a brief comment about Miss Jessica Embry, orchestra teacher at Ashley. This has been a really hard week for our New Hanover County Schools family. And the loss of Miss Embry, I did not have the opportunity to know her, but I've been doing a lot of reading from people that knew her best, and the word that keeps coming up is hero. She was a hero to our students. She was a hero to the two children that she pulled from the water on Sunday, and we just appreciate her service. So just a moment of silence for Miss Embry and the Ashley family. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Crystal, if you could please call the roll.
Stephanie Adams.
Here.
Nelson Bullier.
Here.
Judy Justice.
Here.
Stephanie Craybill.
Here.
Key McManus,
Here.
Stephanie Walker,
Here.
and Peter Wildebohr.
Present.
All right, thank you very much. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wildebohr. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Agenda is approved as written. Next item on the agenda is closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11, A1, A3, and A6, to consider personnel matters and to maintain the confidentiality of personnel records under North Carolina General Statutes 115C-319 and -321, and to consult with the board's attorney to preserve attorney-client privileged information. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve
Thank you.
pursuant to the statutes.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Craybill. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are in closed session. Reese, are we good to go?
Right on Pete.
Was there a yes?
Pete, missing.
Oh, Pete's missing. You got a thumbs up, all right?
I have to use my pants for a napkin.
All right. We will go ahead and go with our next item, and I'm sure Mr. Wildebohr will be joining us in a moment. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the work session on March 12th, 2021, and the minutes for the March interim meeting on March 16th, 2021. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Craybill. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are approved, 6-0. Next item on the agenda, consensus items, personnel report. Dr. Allison Coker, would like to welcome you to the microphone, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Tonight I come to you requesting approval of the personnel report that has been presented to you.
All right, you have heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor to approve the personnel report as listed, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Personnel report is approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, old business on the agenda, the superintendent evaluation process. A quick update for the board. I heard back from Dr. Simmons from DPI yesterday, and she has uploaded the superintendent evaluation training and has sent it to me with the password to be distributed to the board. I'm going to send it to you to watch on your own time. What we need to establish tonight is the date for when we will do a training Q&A with her. So she asked for us to determine 2 to 3 options early May. So if everyone could take a look at their calendars and see if we could come up with a few dates that we can submit to her. It would be a Zoom session, and it would be a public meeting work session for the Q&A opportunity. But if everyone had an opportunity to pull out their calendars, that would be great.
How long is this, did you say it's gonna last, 2 hours?
I would think the session with her, I believe the training is an hour. And so the session with her, I would think we should probably schedule it for 60 minutes
Okay.
for any questions that are remaining after the fact.
And you said,
oh,
sorry,
Go ahead. Yes, Ms. Justice.
in May?
Yes, she's in early May. So obviously we've got our meeting on May 4th. But beyond that, what dates would work for everyone? Let's get like 2 to 3 options.
Madam Chair, I'm fairly flexible. I could do the 5th, I could do the 7th. I could
I'm
also
pretty-
do it an hour before the meeting if we wanted to cram it all into one day. I'm flexible.
I would prefer not to do that before a meeting.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know if I want to add that
That's fine.
to a board meeting night.
Madam Chair?
I'm fairly open and would prefer mornings.
Mornings. Mr. Wildebohr.
Madam Chair, I was going to say either the 5th or 7th, or maybe the 10th, given that we give her several options.
So
10th is
7th,
good.
The 5th, the 7th, or the 10th, can we do just a poll on that? Raise your hand if those dates work. Across the board, Mr. McManus is still thinking, okay. And is your preference for morning, afternoon, or evening? If we could just go down the line.
I'd rather do morning.
Morning,
Morning's good.
morning,
Morning.
okay.
Morning.
Mr. McManus?
I have a doctor's appointment on the 10th at 10:30. That's
So
the reason.
no morning on the, so the 10th would have to either be afternoon or early evening, okay? Ms. Justice?
Well, if we do it in the morning, I'd like to do it at 9, just because I have the grandkids to get off.
All right,
But aren't those school days?
Pardon?
Aren't they school days? Like, they'll be in school in the morning?
I have to make sure they get to school in case, believe me, in the morning, I need to get them to school and then drive out here.
Okay, so could we do it after school starts, when you drop them off?
Well, that's what I just said, 9 o'clock.
9.
Okay,
So I'll
sorry.
offer her the 5th, the 7th, the 10th, and either a 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And I will get back to you as soon as possible with what works for her.
I'm sorry, I believe Mr. McManus can't do the 10th in
Oh,
the
sorry,
morning.
the 10th, not the morning, but yes, afternoon and evening only for that one. So I'll offer the 5th and the 7th for 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. if the 10th is her only available date.
If the 10th is the majority, I can try to change it.
Don't worry about it.
We're
We'll
flexible.
start with the first two and see how we do. Now, the other piece of this, the expectation will be I will forward the training to you this evening after we finish the meeting. The password is embedded in it.
Okay.
So it will just be every board member's responsibility to have previewed the training prior to this meeting. Okay?
Very good.
Yes, Ms.
Madam
Grace.
Chair, is there any documentation that we have actually taken that training? And do we need to have this training in order to participate in the evaluation?
As far as documentation goes, I don't believe it is checking if we've done it. But I think this would be an honor system, being that it's not the type of thing where you're going, it's literally a presentation that's been sent to us, like a webinar. So it's not going to click something off that this email address has done it. So it's going to be on the honor system.
Okay, I guess I was just asking mainly for the fact that I thought we had agreed, or that at least Dr. Faust had asked, that we all are trained on, because it's a pretty complicated and long tool. So if we haven't been to the training, then we shouldn't be able to participate.
Correct. So
Okay, well, I would assume everyone would. I wouldn't know why, we're all adults.
I know,
professionals.
I'm just saying, just checking.
So I will send those dates to Dr. Simmons tomorrow and send the training to the board this evening, and whatever date is selected, just make sure you've had the training completed by the time we meet with her for the Q&A. Sound good? Yep. All right, great. Moving right along, next item on the agenda is our strategic plan, and I believe our NHP partners are waiting patiently on Zoom to provide a proposed strategic planning timeline. And who is presenting this evening? Are they in the room, Crystal, or have they not come in yet? Yeah, they may not have thought that we were going to be done this, moving through so quickly.
Well, that's probably because they've watched some of our other meetings.
In the meantime, if board members just want, the presentation is uploaded into Assembly right now, if you'd like to just preview it as we wait for them to come on.
My question.
Yes,
I know
ma'am.
that they're not here yet, but May 14th, I guess, are we going to do like a virtual meeting with them all in one day?
They're going to be reaching out to set up
Okay.
appointments, yeah. That's their deadline that they want to complete certain things by. Yeah. There's Nancy.
Changed so much. I'll put it in my phone, I forget to change.
Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, we are like moving through the agenda at warp speed tonight, which is very unusual for us. So we are excited to be at the strategic planning agenda item, and we thank you for being here this evening, and we look forward to the presentation and the proposed agenda.
Okay, great. And Pamela Palmer will be joining us also. I'll try to keep going at warp speed if possible. What we want to present to you is just a quick overview of what we're looking at for the strategic planning timeline. We are really excited about getting started on this, and I think it's going to be a wonderful process for everybody to be involved with. Next slide, please. Just a quick review of what the process consists of. There are basically 5 phases. The first one is really the assessment phase, which is critical to figuring out, where you are and what your vision is, those things. And then the second phase is where we come together to actually look at all the data that's assembled during the assessment and to come up with the major goals, the direction you want to go. Following that, phase 3 is to actually build out the specific strategies of where you're going and how you're going to get there. Phase 4 will bring back a recommended plan, and then that will be an opportunity to get additional feedback and fine-tune it. Phase 5 is when we actually finalize the plan, set up the accountability and metrics for you, and implementation begins. So next slide. What we've done is to try to set up a preliminary timeline, and I don't want to walk you through too much detail other than to show you what we're looking at. Just in phase 1 for the assessment, what we're hoping to do is to be able to set up interviews with key stakeholders, including top staff and board, and then to be able to do some either interviews, focus groups, or surveys with other staff. Hopefully, we can get to that by the end of May, because I'm understanding that the end of May is the time when staff will begin to be less available. So what we would suggest there is, if you want in-person interviews, we would like to set up a 2 to 3 day time where we could set up appointments with folks in about 1 hour blocks over that time period and get through a number of those in-person interviews at the same time. On the other hand, if you would prefer them to be done by Zoom, we can do those at a more leisurely schedule, or we can also try to set that up in a quick process schedule. But whatever we do, we want to do it as soon as we can so that we can access the staff as soon as we can for full availability. Following that, we'll turn to external stakeholders who will get, depending on what we learn in our original phase, we'll either be going to them with surveys or with interviews or possibly with focus groups, again, depending on what we get from our initial phase. We also will be, during that time, gathering other data, research data, such as your previous plan and the other documents that you would like us to examine, those types of things. When we get all that together, hopefully no later than August, we will be able to analyze all that data and pull it together so that we can go into phase 2 by the 1st of September. Next slide. So when we get all that data, we would like to set up a time that would be a planning retreat where we can present that data in a structured way and help facilitate an analysis that would result in a really strong vision, mission, and sense of direction, so that by the end of that strategic planning retreat, we would have been able to identify the major goals that you want to pursue for that plan. And those goals, again, remember, are what you see as the key ways that you would move from where we identify you are now with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and where you see yourself going in your vision. And then those goals will be those major foundational stepping stones to get you from here to there. We would love to do that by early September. Moving on to the next slide. The phase after that would be the development of the really detailed framework to go around that, the specific strategies, the action step. This is a phase we would want to engage the key staff leadership, because we would anticipate they will be the ones responsible for carrying out much of the work. So with their input and their knowledge of the weeds and the nuts and bolts, We would build the strategies and action steps out. And then in phase 4, to the next slide, we would bring those recommendations back to you for your review, your further discussion, further input, and takes on what those recommendations are. Then after that, we'll move into the very last phase, which is the next slide, and that is finalizing the plan, taking the input that we get from you and fine-tuning and finalizing the plan, which would include the assessment metrics so that you'll have a way of establishing your accountability on each one of these goals. Once that's all established and done, we'll turn the plan over to you, and it will be up to you through your staff to implement. And we will be available, as I think we mentioned in a previous meeting, that we will be available after we turn the plan over for at least 2 more meetings or discussions if you would like to talk about how the implementation's going. So if we can go to the last slide, next to last slide. Pamela, are you on? I'm not seeing her on here, so I will go ahead and move through this. The key role that we want the board to play in this whole process is a governance role to oversee the process. You don't have to get down and run the process, but to oversee it. So we'll keep coming back to you with updates on where we are, how things are going. The other thing we'll need is for you to be very engaged in the assessment, providing your knowledge, your insights, all the background that you're aware of that will help us define what are some key challenges and opportunities. You'll also need to be engaged in the strategic planning retreat, either through a task force or some other setup, so that while we honor the open meetings law, we also want to be able to have a very informal conversation there when we do that review. So we'll work around that, but you will need to be involved in looking at the analysis of data and setting goals. And then, again, once the details of strategy are worked out around the goals that you set, we will bring those details back and you'll need to review, discuss, give us your further input. And then once the plan is yours, it will be up to you to govern its implementation and to oversee the staff as they perform the actions that we said would need to be performed to move you toward your goals. So do you all have questions about this process?
All right, board members, any questions about the timeline or the process? Yes, Ms.
Yes,
Graybill.
thank you. So will we be able to know who your focus groups are, especially with the the external partners, so that we could maybe suggest others for consideration, not demand, but, suggest?
Yes. One of the things that we'll want to do in those early interviews that I talked about, those very first meetings that we'll set up with you all, is to be sure we've got the right stakeholders. Also, because this is a transparent process, when we finalize the plan, we'll indicate in our final report who was a participant in the process. Now, if we do something, depending on the way we go with the stakeholders, if it's identified to do something like a town hall meeting with parents, we may not name every individual parent, but we would certainly name, for example, the parent association or other indicators of who's there. But also, particularly with the key stakeholders, the external stakeholders, we will be looking to you for your input as to who should be a part of that process.
Okay, and I had one other follow-up. And how about when you are doing the focus group of staff, are we doing all levels of our staff, teachers, principals, on up through central office and other, educators?
Again, we can customize that based on the input from our initial interviews with you all and with the superintendent, but what usually would happen in an organization your size is that we would probably go to only select groups for an actual focus group and try to get surveys done of other staff. But again, we do want to customize it to your needs. So if you see a place where you feel a focus group of particular staff members would be helpful, we certainly would want to build that into the process. But then as you move down from the upper level staff, you may want to go more towards surveys with the line staff just because of the large number of people there.
Okay, yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
about the survey part. That makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions? Nancy, would it be possible to, we have a very engaged board that is excited to be part of this process, and being that the first thing that's listed on there after the meeting with the superintendent is interviews with board members. Would it be
Right.
possible, and I'd open this up to the board, the option was there for in-person. Would you prefer an in-person opportunity to interview with our partners, or would you prefer the Zoom option?
We're really very open either way. It's really up to you. I think Pamela and I both are vaccinated and able to travel, and we're happy to come and, do in-person interviews. If some of your members or partners would feel more comfortable with a Zoom, that's fine too. Occasionally, I've had stakeholders that are going to be, out of state for an extended period and end up doing a phone call with them for that reason. But otherwise, we would be happy to come. And again, I think if we do want to do the in-person, which is great, I love in-person work. If we do that, it would be best, I think, the best use of our time if we can find a set of 2 or 3 days where we can come and talk to a whole lot of people at one time, and not try to go back and forth. But that would be a great thing. If you all are open to it, we would be happy to do in person.
Can we just go down the board and just, what's your preference, in-person or Zoom?
And I agree. I like the idea of in-person, so everything you just said I was gonna say, so there we go.
So, Mr. Wildebohr, does that mean in-person?
In-person.
All right, Ms. Walker?
I'm good in person,
All right,
Yeah, in person.
in-person for me too?
In
Yes.
person.
Yes, all right, you have a board that would love to meet with you in person, so we will get with Crystal to work on some dates. And additionally, I'm sure we'll put Dr. Faust in at that time and other stakeholders that he identifies, to get the biggest bang for the buck during that time that you're here.
Madam
That
Chair,
sounds great.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Crable?
do we meet as a board, or do we meet independently, one-on-one with your team?
I believe it would be individual interviews, is that correct?
Yes, these are individual interviews. We would love to spend, probably it won't take more than 30 to 45 minutes, but I would love to slate an hour to just sit down. Either I or Pamela Palmer will sit down with each of you individually to get your detailed feedback. And I also will want to talk to you as a whole board too, but this first assessment interview, we really want to go in depth with each person individually.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments, concerns, before we let Nancy go back to her evening? All right, we look forward to seeing you in person very soon, and Crystal will reach out with some date options in either late April or early May.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here again this evening.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we move on to the next topic, do we need to extend our current strategic plan that is set to expire on June 30th to November 30th, perhaps?
Yes, that will have to be an agenda item coming up at an upcoming meeting, because right now I believe we voted to extend through June 30th, yes.
We can't do that tonight?
It's not on the agenda, no.
Okay.
All right, next item on the agenda is new business, the removal of the name from Hoggard High Volleyball Court. Is there a motion?
Move to remove the name.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Name will be removed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Head Start. Mr. Bollier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, as you all know, it is Early Childhood Education Month, and unfortunately, Ms. Smiles could not be here with us tonight, but I did want to recognize the work that her and her team put forward every single month, every single day, every single minute when you're working with 3- and 4-year-olds. They're just such a special group, and you know, we are so lucky to have them with us. And also just briefly like to say thank you to our entire county commission for their support of early childhood education in New Hanover County. It is a real team effort. For this month's report, it is straightforward. We do have one action item. We are asking to put the COLA increases toward our fringe benefits as those costs are going up. But first, our numbers are the same as they've been. I did want to point out we have 670 applications received for the 21-22 school year. There's still some time to get yours in if you haven't. We have 85% of our slots filled. So we are doing good things. We are moving forward. This month's expenditure report, thank you very much. And just a reminder, our fiscal year is from May through April. New Hanover County's is from July through June, so it always looks a little different. Plus, we're a month in the rears. Next month, May, will be the end, or this month, April, is the end of our fiscal year. So in June, you'll see our expenditure report completed. It's, like I said, it's a month back. Are there any questions about anything with enrollment or expenditures?
I just had a question. You said you had
Sure.
670 applications, and how many spots are there?
Our enrollment spots are 260
Okay.
for Head Start. Now, there's more early childhood education students in our system. It's just the Head Start numbers. Any other questions from the board? Okay, moving on to our second item this evening, the COLA increases. I just need a motion to approve this from the board if there are no questions.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wildebohr. Thank you, Mr. McManus. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It is approved.
Thank you very much, members of the board. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate it.
All right. Moving right along, Mr. Beaulieu, if you wanted to stay down there, you could, because I believe this is yours too. Our next item on the agenda are policies for first reading. Mr. Beaulieu.
Okay, policies for first reading this month. We don't have too many. I know that there has been a lot of discussion around policy 3620, so if we could begin there. I don't believe, and before we begin, I'll inquire with the rest of the board, was there any other policy a board member wished to discuss? I hadn't heard anything. Okay, so our policy discussion tonight will focus on 3620, extracurricular activities and student organizations. And I know, Mr. Wildebohr, you had asked for this policy to be put on, so please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I just have some concerns. I've talked to several people. I've actually spent the day talking to other counties about how they interpret this policy, how they're fulfilling this policy, especially the part that is highlighted in red about middle school athletics. I did not get a response from Brunswick County, but I did get a response from Pender County. They follow the high school federation guidelines.
So
at the middle school, if I could finish, thank you. So what they do is they take the same policy that the students would have to fulfill at the high school level and bring it down to the middle school level, so that we're not saying, you know, one thing at one level and then having to change it at a different level.
So I just wanted to clarify for this
Yes.
people, I don't know if everybody can see that. The part highlighted in red in policy 3620 is a student participating in middle school athletics can participate on the team consistent with their gender identity.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware.
Thank you for that clarification. And again, the high school has a policy. I've also talked to the high school federation about it. They said that they do leave it to the local boards to make decisions on that, but they have they don't exclude anyone. They just have a policy or a procedure that students need to go through to be able to play on a sport that they are not, that they were not born on that. I don't know how to say that right, but anyway, you know what I'm saying.
Okay, so Mr. Wildebohr, in your talking with Pender County about that, how, did they get specific on how they did those approvals? Because I would like to, after we hear from what you learned, to have Mr. Lewis weigh in on that and his recommendation.
I couldn't understand you at the beginning of your statement.
Hello?
There you go. Speak in direct now.
Speak directly into the microphone. In your conversations today with the gentleman, I guess you said you spoke with the athletic director?
He's actually the secondary director, but athletics, it's the same as Mr. O'Brien.
The same as Mr.
Same
O'Brien,
thing.
okay. Did he give you any indication of the process that they used? Because the High School Athletic Association process is very detailed, and it's also conducted by an independent third party. It's not conducted by school system LEA, the LEA people. So I'm just interested in what they said on how they could do that.
Well, what he shared with me was that they have not had to go through that, broach that subject yet, but they said that they were going to do the same thing in-house that the state did with the third party. So. But
they hadn't developed it yet?
No, they have developed it. It's in play. It's in place. They haven't had to, they haven't had a student athlete that came forward to try to go through that, either at the junior high or middle school level or at the high school level.
So would now be an appropriate time to ask Mr. Lewis to explain to us what that process looks like? Because it's very extensive.
Mr. Lewis, are you in the room here?
I am here via Zoom.
Sir?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for having me. So the North Carolina High School Athletic Association Rule 1.24 does allow transgender athletes if they meet certain requirements. The requirements do require a athlete that is requesting to participate based on their gender identity. They must send a gender identity request form to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. So once the form is completed, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has a committee called the Gender Identity Committee that they use to consider the request. The committee will approve the request if it finds that the student genuinely identifies as the gender indicated in the request form. The process for the North Carolina High School Athletic Association includes a committee that consists of 1, a current member of the board of directors, 2, an LEA or school administrator, 3, a physician with experience in gender identity, healthcare, and or World Professional Association of Transgender Health Standards of Care. 4, a psychiatrist, psychologist, or licensed mental health professional familiar with the standards of the World Professional Association of Transgender Health Standards of Care. And so the committee will also require that the member school has verified that the student is eligible in all other aspects as well. So that is the process of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association that would require us to get some pieces in place. And I'm honestly not sure if we have those individuals available locally for us to incorporate into our process. I've spoken with Mr. Al O'Brien a bit about this as well, who's of course the district athletic director. And I think we both agree that the process, if we adopt the high school process for middle school, it would be a bit more cumbersome than I think our district could handle. Nor if we want to have discussions of getting into the topic of deciding that's a whole nother discussion. But those are some of the considerations that we discussed, which is why the policy that's currently before you had that line of just for middle school students, allow students to participate based on their gender identity. I do think, based on my experience as Title IX coordinator, that there are community members that definitely want to know an answer. And I think the students do deserve an answer as well, so they can understand what they are able to do. And so that's why I recommended having it inserted into the extracurricular policy, so that I, in my everyday role, could have a better understanding of how we were moving forward. And it was also in line with federal government, Biden administration's, they kind of tipped their hand with executive orders and things such as that. For example, on March 8th, President Biden released an executive order on guaranteeing an educational environment free from discrimination on the basis of sex, which specifically included sexual orientation or gender identity. And so that's why I believe it was best to have the line inserted for middle school students instead of being silent on that particular subject.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis, and thank you for being here tonight to provide that clarification and those comments. Other board members, questions, comments? Yes, Mr. McManus.
Coming from my past as a high school principal and junior high, which is all but 6th grade, I don't see it in the policy, so Jarrell maybe can answer. I know that in middle school they try out for athletics, so they have to try out. My question that I think is not addressed in the policy at this point, if they're not selected by a coach, what are the repercussions that could happen to that coach? True. This is a very, very considerable push for a coach. So if I say no, can that coach be sued? Can the district be sued? If I take the child and the child does not play as much, I dealt with this all my life. And this was the norm. Can a student in 3 or 4 weeks into a sport change their mind and say, I'm going back to the girls' sport? How do we handle that? Is that a no-no? Is that a okay? I'm just saying what the school administration and the staff at both levels will have to deal with. I know that the state, the General Assembly, has presented a bill to block. I know the federal government, I don't know if that's a Trump, trumping the president's state-led consideration and or it's a recommendation, but I would like those answers possibly to be in the policy somehow, so that everybody knows what the ramifications or repercussions for the safety of everyone involved. Plus, if you change your mind, you want to go back to another sport, can you?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Boyer.
if my 2 years in this chair has taught me anything, it has taught me this: do not make policy based on what Raleigh might do, only make it based on what it has done. I don't think that bill is going anywhere. I think it would face a certain veto. But more importantly, just for me personally, I think these are valid concerns, but, I think there comes a time when we're talking about policy, that we could play it out and we could try to figure out every eventuality. I trust my coaches, and I trust these students. I don't see this as being problematic. I think students are going to play based on what they feel is appropriate, when they feel it's appropriate, and if they choose to stop playing, I trust them to make those determinations.
Last question. So a student is allowed to play in middle school. They automatically have to go through the process when they get to high school.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Is that fair?
If they're allowed to play in middle school, now
Well-
they enter high school with a whole different arena of circumstances?
I don't like that the High School Athletic Association has that rule myself, but I can't control that.
So I can add in, and Jarrell, you can correct me. I've asked all these questions of Jarrell, throughout the process as part of the Title IX committee, and the state legislature has given the high school association that authority, to do that. I did bring up in policy committee about, I would like some line in there that says, just because you're approved to play in middle school does not guarantee your approval to play in high school. That was voted down, so that's how we have it right here. But if you maybe you didn't understand kind of what Jarrell was talking about, the extensive process that you have to go through, including, interviews with, family, teachers, community members, churchgoers, that you have to really prove that in the high school level, you have to prove that you are really identifying as another gender. So to switch in 3 weeks is not really, that's not gonna that's not gonna be allowed, because you really haven't shown that, like if you tried out for a boys team and you made the team and then decided, oh, now I'm really identifying more as a female, so now I want to play on the female, it would never happen in the same season because we wouldn't even have a chance to go through a process. But so, yeah, all your points are valid. And then also too, if a student feels like they have had any of their rights violated, they would file an Ethics 360 complaint, and then it would come back to Jarrell, and he would work with the coaches and determine if the person was given a fair tryout process. And so Jarrell, if I have not summarized that correctly, would you help me out?
No, I think that's accurate. And the question about a person claiming unfairness or inherent bias in the process of trying out or participating on a team with minutes, I actually have already dealt with that issue when it comes to football. And essentially, the complaint was that a person did not receive a fair process because of their gender. Not that they were transgender, but they're just their gender in general. And ultimately, I investigated it from a climate perspective to see if the school in general had a climate that was discriminatory. And I also investigated to determine if that student had a particular experience directed to them where they had an unfair or discriminatory process. And that's the expectation that I would have if there were future complaints from transgender students about the process. I would look at the climate and look at particular interactions of that student that received or that's making the report or the complaint to determine if there's hints or evidence of some type of discriminatory intent or disparate impact. And so that's how we would ultimately resolve that situation moving forward. And when it comes to the process as a whole, I ultimately do think that there are questions out there from the community members that want to know the answer, which is why I asked for that to be put in the policy. We have talked to other districts, Al, as well, and most of them are stating that they will rely on the high school process, but I am not sure if they actually know what that process entails, or because you kind of do have to prove that you actually do identify you actually do identify with the gender that you're claiming. And so for middle school, I definitely think the process would be easier with a simplified process. And moving forward from middle school to high school, when those students transition, Mr. O'Brien and I definitely agreed that we would make it very clear to middle school students once they transition to high school that the process is completely different. That decision is not made from New Hanover County Schools. So participating in middle school doesn't necessarily guarantee that you would participate in high school, but I do think it could be a positive once they get to the high school level and they are submitting the request to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, in that they would have had teammates, coaches that could attest to their gender identity once it's being reviewed by the committee at the North Carolina High School Association. And so that's ultimately everything we touched on. I think, Ms. Cravel, you touched on everything pretty well there.
Can I just make sure I heard you correctly? You said the majority of the folks you spoke to, other districts, all are following what Pender's doing, our neighbor, which is following the high school federation rules for middle school. Is that correct?
Right, so Brunswick County, according to my information, has no official plans or stance, but they indicated that they would follow the North Carolina High School Athletic Association process. Onslow County, no official stance, but they indicated that they would likely follow North Carolina High School Athletic Association process. Pender County, Wake as well, they intend to follow the North Carolina High School Athletic process. Chapel Hill Carborough, they were spoken to last academic year, but they said that they would actually honor the family's choice, which means that they would allow the student to participate based on their gender identity. But that North Carolina High School Athletic Association rule was put into place in 2019. So Al and myself are not sure how familiar those athletic directors of those school districts are with what they're actually stating they are going to do. I'm not sure how informed they are, not saying they're not informed, I'm not sure how informed they are about the High School Athletic Association's rule, particularly when it comes to the expertise that's going to be required for the committee that makes a consideration for the request by the player, the student.
Madam Chair.
Let's go Ms. Justice and then Mr. Boyer.
Okay, so what you're saying, Mr. Lewis, is that it was only this process that the High School Athletic Association has recommended that the schools are following just went into place in 2019, which was basically last year. And then we had a really confusing season this year anyway, so it really hasn't had a chance to be fully, I guess, followed and implemented on a regular basis yet.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Wildebohr, Mr. McManus, I'm I mean, speaking for me personally, I'm comfortable with the policy. If there is some language that we can add to make you satisfied, I'm absolutely happy to have the policy committee look at that. You know, it would be up to the committee, the policy committee as a whole, to determine whether or not we wanted to strike that language, but I can, you know, let me just state for the record that I will not be in favor of striking that language, but I'm absolutely happy to have a conversation to see if we can come up with better language or a better policy. If that is the will of the majority of the board, I'm happy to do that.
I would ask you to, if at all possible, I think it should go back to the policy committee for further review. I think we need to have input from, you know, from everybody, from, you know, pro, transgender folks, other folks, girls sports. I mean, I talked to a longtime coach in our county today about this very topic, and he said it's, you know, we've done so much in Title IX for women's athletics. I actually did one of my major papers at UNCW showing the difference between the baseball team at Laney at the time, you know, and the softball team. You know, the baseball team had this wonderful facility, they, you know, just gorgeous, and the girls were getting changed in their cars because they didn't have any of those things. Anyway, that was a long time ago, many years ago. But, you know, the coach that I talked to today said, you know, we've come so far in, you know, women's athletics, girls athletics, and it's just, you know, he just felt like it was a shame that we would even think about something like this, but that was his opinion.
So I feel this has been quite a robust discussion. What I'd like to see let's keep us moving here. These policies are just for first reading. If you do have feedback around the specific policy, please make sure that you're sharing that with Mr. Boyer, and he will bring it to the policy committee. Ms. Crable, would you like to leave a final comment?
Yeah, I just needed to say that we have discussed this at the Title IX committee level, and took a straw poll of our group yesterday at our meeting. And the committee wanted me to bring forth, their recommendation was to allow middle school students to participate on the team of the gender with which they identify, without the qualifier of following all the processes of the High School Athletic Association. So on behalf of the committee and the amount of excuse me, work that we've done, I just wanted to have that go on for the record.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a quick note about these policies. They will not be on for second reading until the June board meeting. We wanted to give the public sufficient time to comment on those.
Yeah, the background here, so some policies were approved this past policy meeting, and so the timeline has been shorter. And so instead of, because this month's been funny with the spring break meeting, we pushed it out, our interim meeting's a little bit backed up. So in order for the public to have ample time to be able to review these publicly online, they will be on for second reading in June. Thank you for that reminder, Mr. Boyer. Mr. McManus.
I would suggest openly that you reconsider, go back to committee on the fact that the students understand they cannot, this does not guarantee high school approval.
Please, you can definitely go ahead and share those comments with Mr. Boyer, and he will bring that back to the
As
policy.
a board, we take a lot of heat because we accept so much responsibility. And I just think they need to know that. We need to know that now, if that's what the policy is. I think we need to put it in the policy, please.
Thank you. All right, so we have policies for first reading for approval, or sorry, we don't need to, this is just for review. Never mind, we're not even voting on it. All right, moving right along. Next item is under items brought forward by board members. FAR UV, we are going to welcome Mr. Wildeboer to the microphone.
Thank you for this time. I hope you all had an opportunity to look through the two PowerPoints that were provided for you. We've discussed this for several months, and I thought at this point we should bring it to a vote. We are looking at, instead of system-wide, possibly doing a pilot at one school. So it would be a smaller thing to see. Just please do remember that FAR UV is a safe, as it shows there in multiple studies. It is safe for our students. It actually protects our students from various viruses, so it's not something that would just be for for SARS or COVID. It also could be for, or would be for, the flu and other sicknesses. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to pilot FAR UV on one school's buses. I made an example of Trask Middle School, for example, to see the effectiveness of the FAR UV to limit or eliminate the passing of infections such as COVID, flu, and other airborne illnesses. Further, than to take it out, to send it out for bid.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a first and a second discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Now, the most middle school, elementary schools where these viruses are most prevalent that aren't, right now, I mean, we're doing such a great job with the vaccinations. The rates are decreasing to a certain extent. So this would be something we'd be doing most likely next year anyway, which is where COVID wouldn't be such a factor as just general viruses, which are rampant in elementary schools. So, I mean, I would suggest that possibly we do it with one elementary school, and not just on the buses. It's really hard to tell. I mean, how would we, because the school itself would be, the kids would be mingling a lot. Half of the kids in some elementary schools or more ride cars. So I don't know if buses would be a good, I guess, a place to use them as an example for the whole school. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Okay?
Any question?
Pardon?
It might be a Mr. Anderson question.
Oh, yeah, well, I just want answers. That's all. So, what's your input, Mr. Andrews?
I'll pass the podium.
So you're asking about this on buses?
That's what Mr. Wildeboer was suggesting.
Right. Well, and we have met with the manufacturer, and as I understand it, they're in the process of getting approval to do that. We can't install anything on our buses until the manufacturer gives that okay to the state. And when we inquired about this, they said they had not received the manufacturer's approval, and that we wouldn't be allowed to proceed with this until they had the manufacturer's approval. So, okay, sure.
They did actually speak to one of the manufacturers, and what they were told is as long as it's not permanently affixed, that you would not need that. So basically, their idea is that you would use like what they call super tape, put it up, and then you would not need, because it would not be you know, once you drill a hole, you need to.
Yeah, so that's
what I was
really
told.
you know, that just needs to be finalized.
Yeah,
I mean, the manufacturer's gonna have to, you know, state, you know, what requirements would need to be met before they would permit something like this. It's kind of like if you went and bought a brand-new car and went home and modified the engine or modified the electronics or modified something, then the manufacturer is not going to stand behind that warranty. They're going to tell you that you have to do it in a certain way, not to void any warranties and void the manufacturer's liability. So the bus manufacturers are the same way. They're going to have to review this, provide the state with some guidelines as to if it's installed, you know, to meet these requirements, then we would allow it, and then the state would have to give us permission to move forward.
Are you aware of any other districts in North Carolina currently utilizing this technology?
I am not, but there are 3 districts now in South Carolina, but they obviously have different rules, so. We would be the pilot, I guess, the pilot for the pilot.
I just had a quick question. When you said Trask, I was just curious, what would happen, I mean, I would probably just, as a parent, would want to have some input about whether or not something like this went into my child's school. Would you, if this were to pass, would you ask parents if they were comfortable with this technology near their children, or?
I think that would be, yeah, I think that'd be fine. I think, you know, obviously we would need to have a meeting with the parents, to let parents, or in some form or fashion, let the parents know that these were going to be installed, show them, you know, hopefully they would have the opportunity to view, probably even meet with whatever company it is, because we can't even say this is one company that's giving us some information, but whichever, you know, because we would have to put it out on bid, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Crable.
So we're working on the budget, so if we were to entertain this, even at Mr. Anderson's non-suggestion, you know, non-support, how much would this cost so that we could budget for it appropriately?
Well, he actually asked for the exact numbers. It's about $2,000 and some change per bus. So the reason.
It was 3,000 per unit. They recommended 3 per bus, so $9,000.
Okay.
And how many buses? We have like 33 buses-ish? Oh,
Well, but we're talking about a pilot. That's why I mentioned Trask.
Forgot that zero.
And Trask
Very
has, Ms. Crable, as I was saying, Trask has 5 buses. So if we did a pilot at Trask, you know, you take that times 5, not times 100 some odd buses.
Here, Mr. McManus, and then Ms. Justice.
Sir.
So a yes vote would be dependent upon the approval that you spoke about with buses.
I think to vote to approve this, you need to identify the funding source, which, you know, we could go back and look at and bring back a recommendation. Or you could, you know, if you're going to vote to proceed with 5 buses at a particular school, you should have a funding source identified for that. Otherwise, you could just direct us to, you know, to look at this and bring back a recommendation at the next meeting.
I'd like to amend my proposal, and I think that'd be great if we could ask you to do that.
All right, Ms. Justice?
I'm still concerned, first of all, as I said, Trask is a lot bigger than some of our elementary schools, so it'd be practical to do an elementary school if the money costs, oh, well, it's going to be always money. And I'm still, is this a quantitative data study? Because as I said, if you got a bunch of kids that are riding cars, kids riding buses, they're all over the school together, how are we going to be able to determine whether these particular prevention methods on buses are going to be able to apply, whether or not it's really useful, and it's such a big population and such big areas together? The only way it seems like it would be valid would be if you did it that school individually wide in classrooms and cafeterias too. I'm just concerned about how, as far as a study goes, how useful or how reliable the data would be if we could even gather data on something like this. We'd have to identify what the outcome that you're searching for and then give better parameters. I've done a lot of data crunching in my time. So, any, you know, that's just a concern to me. I would love to know whether this will be helpful, but it's just really hard to see how you could do it in that environment and make it actually valid, that's all.
Well, and like I said, we could definitely, look at it, and I could ask that company to come back a second time to, present and maybe ask, I'm probably not the person to
Okay.
answer nearly as well as they would be able to share. So I could reach out to them again, and maybe if we could get, some of the numbers crunched, we could, hold off for another month and,
So,
if,
Mr. Wildebohr, just to clarify, you're pulling back your motion to vote on it, and you're asking that Eddie and his team find a funding source
I think that'd be great.
to
yeah.
see if it's possible to even do.
Why don't we do that? That sounds
Does
good.
Does that sound good?
That sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes, Ms. Justice.
and when you talk to them, ask them to what the parameters would be for a valid, I guess. Validated, this
Okay.
experiment we're about to go into. And by the way, it'd be wonderful, it's just like the mask. Cutting down on these viruses with the kids would be amazing. In many ways, this has been a great year because a lot of the kids, they haven't been catching colds and stuff when they're around each other because things are a lot safer. So,
Okay.
this is another method.
All right, thank you
Do
very
that.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Anderson, for jumping up here to help out with that. Appreciate it. Yes, Ms. Craven.
I'm sorry to butt in, but I was going through my sticky notes and I realized that I didn't bring up a question about the survey policy, 4720. And what is going to be coming forward to the board from a Title IX committee recommendation shortly will depend on that one being passed. So if we don't pass it until June, then we might have to pass it in May and waive the first reading.
Okay,
I'll
that
just-
definitely.
That's fine, we can talk about that, I can do that.
We can bring any policy
Okay,
forward at the
all
May
right.
meeting. It was just for the bulk, wanted
Yeah,
to
I
give
know,
them.
and I
yeah.
just didn't realize,
Yep,
I didn't know
that's
what our
Yep,
process was.
we can do
Thank
that,
you.
great. All right, next item on the agenda is correspondence. Do any board members have any correspondence they would like to share? All right. Next item, announcements. The New Hanover County Board of Education will participate in the following upcoming meetings. The Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee will meet on May 3rd at 5 p.m. in the BOE Center. The May regular board meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. in the BOE Center. And the policy meeting, or for those two meetings, for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and the May regular board meeting, to ensure adequate social distancing, audience attendance will be strictly limited to no more than 50 people, and the general public will have the option to view remotely on NHCS TV, YouTube. The policy committee will meet on Tuesday, May 11th at 9 a.m. in the BOE Center, and the general public will have the option to view remotely only on NHCS TV, YouTube. All right?
Are we allowed to add any more? Because the Title IX committee gets left off every time.
Yes, when would you?
It is May the 17th,
Okay,
3 to 4:30, and it is run out of this building, but it's usually remote.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, final item on the agenda is adjournment. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bollier. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. McManus. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. 2 codes.